Well, the farmers are revolting. And how you take that depends very much on whether you're a bureaucrat in government trying to impose more legislation, or whether you're an ordinary person who's thinking of a sandwich for lunch. I'm Grannyopteryx. Now, apparently the Spanish farmers are now rioting in the streets. They've done that in France and in Denmark. No, sorry, Holland. They started their own party. Let's hang on a minute. Okay, the Farmer Citizen Movement. The Farmer Citizen Movement is an agrarian and right-wing populist political party in the Netherlands. Right, so that's how the people who wrote this describe them. They're right-wing and populist. Well, I'd say not so much. I'd say that's the sort of people who write this sort of stuff are pretty sure of going to their fridges first thing in the morning and pulling out a carton of milk or even a bottle of milk and pouring that into their coffee, all of which was produced by farmers. What we're talking about here is what sort of farmers, because with the increase of rules, regulations, nitpicking stuff, what happens is that the small farms just get snowed under and finally fold, and the whole business is taken over by agricorps. And agricorps, well, I'll give you the opinion on agricorps as voiced by my son, who was at the time 15, and we were visiting America, where most food is produced by huge agricultural businesses, a process that started with the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. You know, the Grapes of Wrath actually talks about the big companies taking over the small farms for a pittance. Well, we were visiting people there, and they took us out to a Chinese restaurant. They told us was absolutely wonderful, and my son, being a boy, I can't stand the stuff, but he ordered sweet and sour chicken, and they came with a plate. I'm not kidding you, it was like that big, and it was piled high with orange glistening chicken. It was enormous. And my son took a few spoons, put it into his bowl, started eating it, and looked at me and said, "This doesn't taste of anything. It's just lumps of protein coated in sugar." I had a taste. Well, I don't like sweet and sour chicken anyway, but really, yeah, all I could taste was sugar. It was like a toffee apple without the apple. So if a 15-year-old boy can complain about food being tasteless, it's got to be really bad, hasn't it? And that was what introduced me. I'm sorry to all my American viewers, but American food, by and large, is pretty terrible. And it's the product of huge agricultural companies who've come up with a formula that maximizes their profits. And, you know, there's no art to it. They just use what they can at the cheapest level and then sell it to you at whatever price they want to, because there's nobody else selling it. Anyway, that's what agricorps do, and I would much prefer it if we didn't get too many of those here in Britain, indeed in Europe. And the farmers in Europe really do care about this stuff. So then I made a few notes here. So all these rules and regulations that are being pushed by the EU, but also our government here in Britain, they are, as Jordan Peterson said, and others before him, don't look at what people say, look at what they do. And what the governments are doing, despite their fine words, is they are pushing small family businesses out of business across the board. But it's especially important when we're talking about farmers. Now, this has come about because of the structure. I'm just talking about Britain now. The structure of our political system, which was set up in such a way that a lot of the people who were making the laws for the country were landowners, especially in the House of Lords. And the House of Lords was attacked by Tony Blair's government. It wasn't modern. There were too many hereditary lords in it. But I want to point something out to you. A hereditary lord is usually there because he or she is a big landowner. When you are a big landowner, you have an investment in the country. You have land you want to pass to your children. You are invested in the future. So the people who were making the laws, now look, you can call them snobs, aristocrats, whatever you want. You may think it's unfair, but that's why I have my reservations about the Reform Party, because they want to make the House of Lords an elected chamber. We don't need a lot more politicians running our country. Those stuck in the mud, stodgy old landowners were thinking 80, 100, 200 years into the future. No modern politician thinks that far into the future. And that's the problem. Now, where are my notes? Yeah, one of my sons was visiting somebody who did have an inherited estate. It was a huge estate. And my son said he wouldn't have lived his life for anything. He had so many responsibilities. I said, why doesn't he just sell up? He said, no, there are villages, whole villages who depend on him for a livelihood. He can't let go. And he lives a life, yeah, he's rich. But he's not like he sits back filing his nails all the time. And anyone who's watched Jeremy Clarkson's television series, The Farm, they can see the sort of things that happen to farmers. It's bad enough, especially in Britain, where you're battered by unpredictable weather. But to be battered by your own government, it's heartbreaking. And I do believe that farmers have some of the highest rates of suicide of all the suicide statistics. There's a famous one who had a side hustle selling double glazing. He worked for Everest. It probably gave him a fairly good income. And one year his strawberry crop failed. Unpredictable weather again. He killed himself. It's a terrible thing. His son said it was preying on his mind. I'm interrupting to remind you to click like and to subscribe and share. Also, I'm constantly being told that YouTube removes subscriptions without the subscriber realizing it. So please click the notification bell and check that you really are still subscribed. All the links to my other channels are in the description, including links to donation sites. I'm always grateful for donations, but simply clicking like is the best thing you can do for this video and my channel generally. Thank you. You know, you spend months planning from the year before, ploughing, preparing, getting in fertilizer, or, you know, getting the workers together to plant the stocks or whatever they're called, and everything starts growing, and then suddenly it's all gone. The whole year completely wasted. That's enough to prey on anyone's mind. I wouldn't want to be a farmer, but people who are farmers, and some of them are nasty people, admittedly, like everywhere else. But they do provide food for us. Now, what's destroying this is our regulations in Britain. Inheritance tax. Inheritance tax across the board stops people from thinking into the future. If you know that your kids are going to have to sell your house when you die, you're not thinking about expanding it or doing more with it, or maybe buying the neighbour's house and making your house even bigger or something like that. You're not thinking in those terms anymore. So there's inheritance tax. In my opinion, the rot really started, and for the whole of Europe, with the British fox hunting bill. Now, I know fox hunting is a very emotive subject. I happen to believe it's important, and when I look at the statistics, the fox numbers since the fox hunting bill have dropped catastrophically in the country. They've dropped because people are just shooting them. And when you shoot foxes, you shoot the young and healthy. When you hunt foxes, the only ones you catch are the diseased ones or the old ones. And I want to tell you something. I mean, the metropolitan people who've lost their connection with real life. When a fox gets old, it doesn't retire to the back of the burrow and sit in front of the fire reading the newspaper and smoking his pipe or knitting or whatever while his cubs come with cups of tea. That doesn't happen. If you can't hunt for your own food, you die, and you die slowly. When a fox gets old, loses teeth or whatever, it starves to death. If it's very lucky, it collapses and dies at once. If it's not so lucky, it collapses and then the crows eat it to death. Or the rats or whatever. It's not a nice end for any wild creature. And people in the towns, they don't seem to realise that. When people hunt foxes, they catch the ones who are least able to run away. And of course, fox hunting is in the winter when all the cubs are grown. But when you get urban foxes now, and of course foxes have tended to move to the richer pickings of the cities, you get whole families of foxes just being gassed, in their burrows or warrens, or sorry, I've forgotten what the fox lair is called. It's just slipped my mind. Anyway, they just pump gas into there and they kill the vixens and their cubs and whatever. You have to get rid of foxes when they become a nuisance. The only question is how. And yeah, somebody said to me once, why don't you just shoot them? Yeah, that's fine. If you get a clean kill, great. What happens if the fox just has half its leg blown off? Well, we're back to the original scenario I told you about. Foxes are quick and they move around in the dark. You can't tell me you're going to get a clean kill every time. What about traps? Okay, here's a steel box. Fox is stupid enough to go into steel box. Lid closes. There's this fox. Doesn't understand steel boxes. Doesn't think, oh, well, the farmer's going to put me down humanely. It's just terrified out of its wits. It's in an environment it has no knowledge about, and then merciful release maybe hours later. I mean, just think about it. But I once told this to some woman who was very much against fox hunting, and she listened to me, and she didn't have an answer, and she said, well, I don't care. I don't like the idea of fox hunting. That is not a logical argument. Anyway, I've gone completely off the subject. It started with the fox hunting bill, because fox hunting is not only a way of controlling foxes, it is also a way of bringing a community together. They have to organise it communally. Farmers allowed the hunt to go over certain fields, not others. It's all very carefully orchestrated and planned. And that meant there was a community there. And that's the one thing that Tony Blair's government didn't want. Small communities of people cooperating like that. No, we've all got to be part of a metropolitan sludge, buying our food from factories. And that's what's going on here. So there's inheritance tax, fox hunting, regulations of various sorts. We've left the EU, but we're still using their regulations mostly. And the link between the country, the land and the future is broken. So anyone who is wealthy enough in land and doesn't want the headaches will sell up and just bugger off to Martinique or whatever. And that's where the link between Britishness and the land gets broken, and the government's doing it. Now, again, back to Jordan Peterson, look at what they do, not what they say. What they're doing is destroying the people's link to the land. Now, in Europe, they riot. In Britain, we had the Countryside March. I was on it, by the way. And it was all very gentlemanly. The police were trying to aggravate people. You could see that. We got kettled a lot, and they were trying to force people to burst. They didn't, because, well, British farmers are awfully gentlemanly. But they're rioting in Europe because that's what they do in Europe. And so, yeah, end of story. People have to eat. They have to buy their food. And the question is, from whom are we going to buy our food? From small farmers who take a pride in what they produce, or big agricorps who couldn't give a flying you-know-what about anything except what the rules say, and very often they break those. And the problem is they break them and they don't get punished because they're too big to fail. Okay, do I have any more notes? No, that's it. That's my thoughts on the current farmers' revolts going on in Europe. Till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.